Democrats have won a federal legal battle, granting them the right to disqualify people they believe engaged in insurrection against this country. In breaking news from Kyle Cheney, a federal appeals court has ruled that the 14th Amendment's bar on insurrectionists holding office may be applied to current and future political candidates. My friends, we are inching ever closer towards civil war. And I've been saying this for some time. We have an article from Robert Reich, Democrat guy, very prominent, albeit I think he's wrong, but he writes an article about how we're already in a second civil war. I don't completely disagree with him, but I think it's fair to break down what that really means. Now, I've said before, I think we're in it. I think we're in a civil war, fourth and fifth generational warfare, information warfare, manipulation tactics, but let's slow down. Let's say civil war means kinetic warfare. In which case, we're not there. There's strife, as Stephen Marsh puts it, meaning people are being killed for political reasons, but we're not at the point where people are, forming state militias and governments to go against other states or the federal government. But I do believe we will eventually find ourselves in this position. Why? Well, there are many similarities between what's happening now and what happened in 1860 with the first Civil War. Let me lay it down for you. Democrats are trying to disqualify Madison, Cawthorne, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, basically 147 Republicans they're trying to bar. This is a legal battle for them, but it doesn't mean anyone is being disqualified. Madison Cawthorne, who is the subject of this lawsuit, has already lost his primary, but they're not stopping there. They're saying, you know what? No. We don't care if he lost his primary. We're going to prevent him from being able to ever run for office again simply because he spoke at a public rally that was permitted. That's their argument. Now, maybe they'll lose. Maybe they will. I think it's likely they will. But what if they get a judge who's a Democrat who says, no, that was all insurrection? What if they argue, if you voted not to certify the election results, that was insurrection? It's an interpretation a judge could make. And then what? Populist Republicans are just going to start being barred from holding office. Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert being good examples. Then what? Right now, turnout in the first 10 state primaries among Republicans was 60.9%, shattering records. The latest news out of Georgia, voter turnout through the roof. Even though the Democrats keep screaming that they were attempting to engage in voter suppression and did pass voter suppression laws, quite the opposite. More people are engaged in early voting and voting in the primary. When the Democrats take political action to try and win these legal battles, that's it, man. Don't ignore the signs. Here's what I think could happen, and then I'll walk you through the news about where we're currently at, because we got people screaming, Liz Cheney, Trump is the most dangerous, ultra MAGA must be stopped. Let me give you my proposed scenario. It is speculative, and it's probably wrong, but I entertain the thought. Abortion being the principal moral issue. Right now, if you look at abortion by states, it's very similar to the Civil War lines. So what happens? Republicans win the Senate and they win the House. They then move to ban abortion federally. Talk to any pro-lifer and they'll say, for the most part, yes, they would like to see abortion banned federally. You are seeing blue states and red states deviate further and further to the extremes of their position, meaning pro-lifers are like, we're going to ban it outright, period. Pro-choice, I don't think you can even call it that, pro-abortion, they're saying no restrictions at all. This is causing or contributing to geographic hyperpolarization. You now have states completely at odds and already defying the federal government. One example is California saying we're a sanctuary state. Immigration laws not being upheld. Republicans win the Senate, win the House. They pass a bill. Joe Biden vetoes it. Never going to happen. Donald Trump says, the first thing I'll do if I get elected is I'm going to pass that bill and we're going to ban abortion. If he does, and I think it's out there. I don't think it's extremely likely. I'm saying it's a possibility. You're going to see blue states say no. Many people have argued for peaceful divorce. Robert Reich says we're drifting towards that. You need to understand the first Civil War was started by peaceful divorce. And quickly after, when the federal government said we want our military capabilities upheld, war broke out. So even if we have a peaceful divorce, even if blue states say we no longer will listen, I'm going to show you the timeline at least part of it, of the Civil War. So you can understand we are headed in a similar direction. Call it peaceful, whatever you want. Lawfare begets conflict, begets separation, and then fighting. So let's read the news. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com and become a member if you want to support the work I do here, the work we do at Timcast. You want to see us hire more journalists. As a member, you will get access to exclusive segments from the Timcast IRL podcast Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. You will also be supporting all of our journalists, and you'll be supporting our infrastructure. We use Rumble, as I often say. It's important. They're an alternative to the big tech Silicon Valley ecosystem. Support businesses that support building up this space. We can be more resilient to censorship, and so can you. Go to timcast.com, be a member, but don't forget to smash that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel, share the show, take the URL, put it wherever you can. If everybody shared this right now, we'd be bigger than CNN and MSNBC overnight. So please consider sharing. Let's read the news. As I showed you from the tweet from Kyle Cheney. Kyle Cheney is the senior legal affairs reporter with Politico, with a focus on January 6th, mentioning a federal appeals court has ruled the 14th Amendment's bar insurrectionists holding office may be applied to current and future political candidates. The filing is here from Politico, and they say, because let me make sure I actually I have this. Okay, here we go. They say, a few words about what we have not decided. We express no opinion about whether Representative Cawthorne in fact engaged in insurrection or rebellion or is otherwise qualified to serve in Congress. We likewise do not consider whether Article 1, Section 5 of the Constitution reserves such determinations exclusively to the House of Representatives, or whether states may play a role in regulating ballot access based on constitutional qualifications under the time, place, and manner clause of Article 1, Section 4. Nor do we reach Representative Cawthorne's due process and First Amendment claims. We hold only that the 1872 Amnesty Act does not categorically exempt all future rebels and insurrectionists from the political disabilities that otherwise would be created by Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. The judgment of the district court is therefore reversed, vacated, and remanded. Now, there's a lot in there, but they're basically saying the previous court's ruling about the Amnesty Act is void. If you engage in insurrection after the Civil War, you can be removed, opening the door to many, many more. We have this from Jeffrey Levin. I don't know who Jeffrey Levin is, but he's got 638,000 followers. Granted, he's following 600,000 people, so he probably only has actually like 30,000 followers. Anyway, I digress. He says we need to enforce the 14th Amendment to defend against an existential threat to our democracy. Now, I don't care about this individual or their following. I care about the Occupy Democrats meme that was posted. Quote, after the last Civil War, we passed the 14th Amendment, where Section 3 provides that insurrectionist officials shall be banned from future office. To prevent another civil war, we must enforce Section 3, banning any official who participated in the January 6th insurrection. A quote from Tristan Snell, former New York Assistant Attorney General. All right, where are we at? John Bonifaz posted on May 16th, we just filed on behalf of Georgia voters challenging Rep. Greene's eligibility. Our petition for appeal before the Fulton County Superior Court. The mandate of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment must be followed. And where does this bring us? To the New York Times. The 147 Republicans who voted to overturn the election results. And this is what's being argued right now by many of these Democrats, that if you voted to overturn the election results, you engaged in insurrection against this country. How long until they start bringing the cudgel of lawfare to these individuals to disqualify them? In fact, they already are. As you can see, you've got Elise Stefanik, you've got Lauren Boebert. I'm fairly certain Marjorie Taylor Greene is in here somewhere. Obviously, you got Louis Gohmert. You have 147 people here. You got Josh Hawley. You've got senators. You've got congressmen and women. If they start to remove people from office or stop them from being able to run, this is not a functioning political system. It is not a democracy, nor is it a constitutional republic. My friends, this is quite literally just a collapse. Democrats can't win. The Republicans have record turnout. They know they can't win, and they refuse to give up power. So lawfare. I've mentioned this before, that when you start using legal power to remove someone from office, despite what the people might actually want, you're going to get a civil war. Let me go back to that meme from Occupy Democrats. They want a civil war. They genuinely want a civil war. They accuse me of wanting one because projection is what the left does. No, I don't. I want the United States to stand tall against China, and I want to crush the establishment and the woke lunatics and unify this country. Maybe that's not possible, but you better understand, you will not be living comfortably in a civil war. The reason why I say they want a civil war is that, look at this manipulation. They have to ban Republicans from running for office, otherwise we'll get a civil war. Are you joking? If you remove popular politicians like Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene, you will get a civil war. If people feel that their views are not being represented, you will get a civil war. If people feel that their rights are being crushed, you will get a civil war. And thus, I feel like it's inevitable. I'm not saying it's guaranteed. I'm saying if we remain on this path, straight ahead, I can see civil war. There are many roads and paths we may end up taking. For all I know, in a few months, the Democrats all concede, the midterms happen, Republicans win such a resounding victory that Democrats change their tune, walk away from the edge, the woke are left holding an empty bag, and everything simmers down. It's entirely possible. I'm saying if we do not course correct, we are seeing escalation across the board. Let me show you what comes next. Kyle Cheney says the January 6th Select Committee needs one last legal victory to access the RNC's internal files before next month's public hearings. Are you all insane? Yeah. Midterm season. Let's break into the Republican National Committee's paperwork, internal files. And then we'll see if the American people have confidence in our elections. Perhaps it doesn't matter to them. Perhaps it literally just does not matter to them. They don't care. They just want power, and they will gut this system to get whatever they want. From the Washington Post, Democrats beware. The primaries foretell a spike in GOP turnout. And here's why it's happening. Most of the discussion so far about Tuesday's primary elections has focused on the ongoing battles between factions within the two parties. There's a bigger story that pundits are missing. Strong turnout in Republican primaries portends an excellent year for the GOP. The pro-GOP pattern is unmistakable. Turnout among Republicans in the 10 states that have held primaries so far is up substantially from the last comparable election year. Meanwhile, turnout in Democratic contests is down in 5 of those states and up only marginally in most others. In total, according to data compiled by political consultant John Kuvalon, GOP turnout is up 32%, while Democratic turnout is down 3%. And they know it. Your woke, psychotic, cult nonsense has done this to you. 2 things. Some of those Republicans that are now voting, increase in those numbers, probably used to be Democrats. Some of those Democrats who left probably left because of your woke, psychotic behavior. Among other things, it's the economy, stupid. The economy is bad. People are changing political parties. And now we are advancing towards something a bit more dramatic. NBC's Yamish Alcindor, sorry for not pronouncing your name correctly, of Georgia's voter suppression laws, saying Republicans think, quote, these black people don't deserve the access to citizenship in the way that other Americans do, that they haven't worked for it, and they don't understand the weight of American democracy. They can't reflect. That's what they think. They think people think that's insane. I'm sorry. That is just categorically false. Talk to any Republican, not true. In fact, there are black conservatives who will tell you that's just insane. If that's the path they're taking, they will inflame tensions among the left with this race, psychotic woke nonsense, and they won't realize why it is they're losing. Why the GOP primary turnout suggests red wave in November midterms. Why Georgia heads to polls after highest primary turnout ever, despite new voting laws. A 212% jump from 2020. But they said it was voter suppression? Across the board, everybody is voting. Take a look at this from Glenn Greenwald. One of the smarter and more independent-minded left liberal writers, Sam Adler-Bell, has a good article in the New York Mag on the Nina Jankowicz DHS fiasco and the dangers of disinformation industry, basically saying they have a psychic wound that they can't reflect. He nods to a few of what he sees as rhetorical excesses about Jankowicz herself. I think the objections to her were fastidiously factual, but he highlights the key point. Government officials are professional liars. Trusting them with disinformation boards is madness. Incredible. They cannot reflect. They are going nuts. Liz Cheney, who's basically a Democrat, says Trump is a threat the U.S. has never faced before and tells Americans to stand up to the liars and protect the Constitution. Over at Salon, any Republicans want to speak out now? Alarm after Trump shares Civil War post. Incredible. They blame Trump because he basically retweeted, someone said the words Civil War. Okay. Well, let's take a look at what Robert Reich has to say, a prominent Democrat strategist and personality. He says, the truth about America's second Civil War. Also, he wrote an article for The Guardian saying it's already happening, but here's what he writes. The Supreme Court's upcoming decision to reverse Roe v. Wade doesn't ban abortions. It leaves the issue to the states. As a result, it will put another large brick in the growing wall separating blue and red America. Some say we're on the verge of a civil war, but that's not right. It won't be a formal secession, but a kind of benign separation analogous to unhappily married people who don't want to go through the trauma of a formal divorce. We are already quietly splitting into two Americas, one largely urban, racially and ethnically diverse, and young. The other largely rural or ex-urban, white and older, each running according to different laws with different sources of revenue. The split is accelerating. Red zip codes are getting redder and blue zip codes bluer. Of the nation's total 3,143 counties, the number of super landslide counties where a presidential candidate won at least 80% of the vote jumped from 6% in 2004 to 22% in 2020. Notice different sources of revenue. For those of you who are long fans or listeners of my podcast and show, you know that I brought this up, I think, 4 years ago, when I said, by censoring so many people and banning everybody, you will eventually foment parallel economies. And when you do, there is nothing tying either faction to each other. You know what's really remarkable about that? Shout out to all my haters who are like, can we get one prediction from Tim Pool right? Sure, there's one. You actually now have, from Dan Bongino and many others, a company called Parallel Economy that facilitates financial transactions for people who are concerned about censorship on the left. We at timcast.com use Rumble because we don't want to be censored by big tech, Silicon Valley, psychotic woke nonsense. And more is happening. Once we are completely censor-proof, and we're not yet, then people are going to speak freely. They're going to build up. You're going to see more conversations. You're going to see more challenging. You're going to see an entrenching of these ideas, a refusal to back down, and no reason to cater to the other side. Already we wonder. I ask this. I make no money off the woke. I have no viewership from them, and I don't care for their ideas. I think they're bad ideas. So why would I ever come out and try to throw them a bone? I wouldn't. Same thing is true for the woke. They're not going to get anything from me. So they're just going to lie about me and no one cares. I don't care when, I care to a certain degree if they defame me and it damages me, and if I have to sue, I would. But what can I say when they post nonsense about me? If it's their opinion on certain issues, I don't care. People are like, yo, Tim, people are saying these things about you. I don't care. It's like telling me the people in France are complaining about something I said. What do I care about people in France? They have nothing to do with me. We have already split into two countries with different sources of revenues and laws. It is already happening. You want peaceful divorce? I warn you, peaceful divorce very quickly turns into hot conflict. But it's happening. Whether you care for it, whether you want it to or not, it's here. When people like Robert Reich, people on the left, are saying the same thing as people on the right, and then the left pretends like they're angry at Donald Trump for saying civil war when they're calling for it, or at the very least, saying it's already happening. It is an emergent phenomenon. It doesn't matter if you want it or don't want it. It is happening. Now, he goes on to expand upon his ideas. America is growing more geographically polarized. I completely agree. I've said the exact same thing. He says blue states are moving the opposite direction. Colorado, Vermont are codifying a right to abortion without restriction. Some are helping cover expenses for out-of-staters. While Idaho proposed a ban on abortions that empowers relatives to sue anyone who helps terminate a pregnancy after 6 weeks. After the governor of Texas ordered state agencies to investigate parents, but you get the point. Now, the funny thing is, I'll give you an example of why, another reason I think we're heading in this direction and we're doomed. Not doomed in the sense like it's going to be bad for everybody, you're going to die. I'm just saying doomed in the sense the U.S. will break. Democrats just tried to pass a bill legalizing the termination of a baby's life at 9 months if the mother's health is at risk. My question, if you can remove the baby from the mother without killing the mother and without killing the baby and you'd be saving the mother, why kill the baby? The CDC defines abortion as terminating a pregnancy that does not, in a way that does not result in a live birth. That means if the baby's alive, viable, as the law said, viable, meaning it can survive outside the womb on its own, why kill it? I didn't say it was happening. I said, why legalize it? The response was the media just saying, right-wing nutjob Tim Pool is obsessed with things that aren't happening. There's no real dialogue anymore. I never said it was happening. I said, why legalize it? Why? They can't answer the question because it's tribalism. Well, let me show you the conclusion of Robert Reich's thesis, and then I'll explain that it's wrong. He says, where will this all end? Not with two separate nations. What America is going through is less like a civil war and more like a Brexit. A lumbering mutual decision to go separate ways on most things, but remain connected on a few big things, such as national defense, monetary policy, and civil and political rights. We'll still be America, but we're becoming two versions of America. The open question is analogous to the one faced by every couple that separates. How will we find ways to be civil toward each other? Robert, close but no cigar. You're mostly wrong. Well, I should say, actually, you're mostly right, but you're missing a few key points. There you go. I got it out. 1. California is a sanctuary state. They are not upholding the law as it pertains to illegal immigration. This, in the past, according to some NGOs, provided them with one extra electoral vote and congressional seat, because congressional seats are apportioned not based on citizenry, but based on population size, period, regardless of whether you're a citizen or not. Thus, they gained disproportionate federal power. What happens when Texas says, we do not respect the rights of their members of Congress because they are violating federal law? And in doing so, giving themselves disproportionate power at the federal level to negatively impact our rights. Let me show you what's going on. Let's go back to a quick reading of the timeline of the first Civil War. My friends, it was a peaceful divorce, at least for 2 months. And then the federal government said, we don't recognize you, and we want our military bases upheld. So what happened? Well, the state said no, the federal government said no, and they started shooting at each other. Over at Wikipedia, for the outbreak of the war, they mention very interesting things. They say, before the war, South Carolina did more than any other state to advance the notion that a state had the right to nullify federal laws, and even to secede from the United States. The convention unanimously voted to secede on December 20th, 1860, and adopted a secession declaration. It argued for states' rights for slave owners in the South, but contained a complaint about states' rights in the North, in the form of opposition to the Fugitive Slave Act, claiming that northern states were not fulfilling their federal obligations under the Constitution. The cotton states of Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas followed suit, seceding in January and February of 1861. Let me show you about this law, the Fugitive Slave Act. It was a law passed by the U.S. Congress on September 18th, 1850, as part of the compromise between Southern interests in slavery and Northern free soilers. The act was one of the most controversial elements of the 1850 compromise and heightened Northern fears of a slave power conspiracy. It required that all escaped slaves upon capture be returned to the slaver, and that officials and citizens of free states had to cooperate. Abolitionists nicknamed it the Bloodhound Bill, after the dogs that were used to track down people fleeing from slavery. The act contributed to the growing polarization of the country over the issue. It was one of the factors that led to the Civil War. Let me bring this to the modern time. Southern states said, we have a federal law that says you must return slaves. Now, I actually think that was good that they were not upholding that law, because slavery is, in my opinion, outright and obviously a violation of the Constitution. How dare you say all men are created equal in, I believe that was a Declaration of Independence, and then have slaves? Yeah, sorry, doesn't fly. And I love bringing up Frederick Douglass, who challenged the American people to stand by the words they themselves wrote in saying such a thing. But here's, outside of any moral statement, look at the fact statement. If the federal government passes a law saying you must, and you don't, then you're going to see states say, if you will not uphold the law, why are we being forced to do the same? If the South was being told they could not have certain things, but the North was not agreeing to it, civil war seemed likely. Granted, slavery was wrong. Go cry about it. Today, we have strong moral issues on immigration and abortion. California is being told they must uphold federal law on illegal immigration. They're not doing it. They've declared themselves a sanctuary. In New York City, they allow non-citizens to vote. At what point does Texas, Mississippi, Florida, Georgia, North Dakota even, Wyoming, West Virginia, at what point do the red states say, you allow people to come in, violate our laws, and if you will not uphold them at the federal level, why are we subject to your taxes, your laws? That's what precipitated the first Civil War, the same argument. Why would it not reemerge in the face of the exact same problems? Now, there's challenges, absolutely. But when you have blue states saying no restrictions on abortion, red states saying we must have restrictions on abortion, you are looking at these issues. Here's what I think may actually happen. I think the Republicans will try to ban abortion. Roe v. Wade's gone. Oh, they say it's a state's issue. Sure, for now. For now, they say, we just want the states to decide. Ask a pro-lifer. I asked Seamus Coughlin on Timcast IRL, would you be in favor of banning abortion at the federal level? He said, yes. Would you vote for people who advocated for such? Yes, absolutely. Well, there it is. Pro-lifers, maybe not all of them, but some of the most prominent would absolutely support a federal ban on abortion. So Congress gets in, the Republican, they try and pass the bill, defeated by filibuster or veto. Donald Trump says when he gets in, he will sign the Save the Children Act, federally banning abortion. And blue states will say, no, we will not enforce that law. You will then have people going to these red states to get abortions. Going to the blue states. The red states will say, anybody who goes and commits these crimes are in violation of federal law and they should be arrested. Hey, the blue states will then say, we're not going to enforce that. Sorry. Just like this. Now, you can argue whoever you think is right. I'm not issuing a moral statement. You can say the Democrats will be right. They defied the Fugitive Slave Act in the first place. They'll defy the ban on abortion. Regardless of who you think is going to win, it is what leads to civil war. Red states will say you're allowing people to commit murder. Blue states will say we don't care. I think the situation is, in a sense, reversed in a lot of ways. I don't know if it's true and correct, but my understanding is that every instance where a group has tried to deny personhood to a human being, they've lost. Slavery was a good example. Today, what you have are people fleeing to blue states to effectively deny personhood rights of unborn babies. And for some reason, the left is arguing from the Bible that life begins at first breath, so it says. I don't know if it says that. I just think if a baby is viable, why kill it? But outside of any moral arguments, if the right says unborn children should have rights, and that includes men having to pay child support for a woman as soon as she's pregnant, which they do say, and then in blue states, they're like, we can kill that, you have a very serious problem. You have red states saying the unborn child is under our protection, and a blue state saying we can kill them. What do you think that leads to? I think it leads to civil war. There's other factors involved, of course, but let me show you this. They mention January and February of 1861, we saw Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas secede. South Carolina. This was before Abraham Lincoln became president. 7 states had seceded. Now, let's read some more. Let's read this. They say, among the ordinances of secession passed by the individual states, those 3, Texas, Alabama, and Virginia, specifically mention the plight of the slaveholding states at the hands of the Northern abolitionists. The rest make no mention of slavery issue and are often brief announcements of the dissolution of ties by the legislatures. However, at least 4 states, South Carolina, Mississippi, Georgia, and Texas, also passed lengthy and detailed explanations of their cause for secession, all of which laid blame squarely on the movement to abolish slavery and that movement's influence over the politics of northern states. Southern states believed slaveholding was a constitutional right because of the Fugitive Slave Clause of the Constitution. Those states agreed to form a new federal government, the Confederate States of America, on February 4th, 1861. They took control of federal forts and other properties within their boundaries with little resistance from outgoing President James Buchanan, whose term ended on March 4th. 7 states had already seceded. On March 4th, 1861, Abraham Lincoln was sworn in. In his inaugural address, he argued the Constitution was a more perfect union than the earlier Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union, that it was a binding contract, and called any secession legally void. The fascinating thing is that we then saw many other states secede because, I believe, of Fort Sumter. This battle began in April of 1861. On April 15th, 1861, Lincoln called on all the states to send forces to recapture the fort and other federal properties. The scale of the rebellion appeared to be small, so he called for only 75,000 volunteers for 90 days. In western Missouri, local secessionists seized Liberty Arsenal. On May 3rd, 1861, Lincoln called for an additional 42,000 volunteers for a period of 3 years. Shortly after this, Virginia, Tennessee, Arkansas, and North Carolina seceded and joined the Confederacy. To reward Virginia, the Confederate capital was moved to Richmond. It's fascinating. Before Lincoln even became president, 7 states had seceded. Then, with Fort Sumter, my understanding, I read a book about this a long time ago, was that people were shocked that Union forces were advancing the way they were, and it terrified them. So they said, we're done with this. Maryland, Delaware, Missouri, and Kentucky were slave states that had divided loyalties to northern and southern businesses and family members. Some men enlisted in the Union Army and others in the Confederate Army. West Virginia separated from Virginia and was admitted to the Union on June 20th, 1863. Take a look at this map. You can see the Union versus the Confederacy. Dark blue are Union states. Light blue is Union territories not permitting slavery. The yellow states were border Union states permitting slavery. Of these states, West Virginia was created in 1863. Red was Confederate states, and the orangish are Union territories permitting slavery, claimed by the Confederacy at the start of the war, but where slavery was outlawed by the U.S. in 1862. I find this map particularly interesting because it could very much work similarly. I don't think the Civil War ever ended. We had the clemency, 1872, where they were like, okay, if you can run for office even if you were involved in the Civil War because we were trying to stop Civil War. Take a look at these states. I mean, you've got New England, you've got Illinois, you've got Ohio, Michigan, Minnesota. You've got Washington, Oregon, Nevada, California. They're all blue. It would be very similar. Now, many of these territories in the middle might split the country in half, but it seems like a North versus South thing is entirely possible. What you need to understand about Texas is that their involvement was mostly about geography. They're surrounded. What option did they have? Who would they do trade with? Who would they do business with if they sided with the North? They'd be just occupied instantly anyway. But of course, Texas was a slave state, part of the Confederacy. I don't know exactly how it will play out. I just think it's silly when people say we need to purge people from federal government. Why? That was part of the problem which led to the Civil War. They say we can have sanctuary states and we don't have to abide by federal law. Also something that led to the Civil War. Now they're trying to disqualify people. Okay. Get rid of those who truly represent the values of the American libertarian or conservative right or whatever, post-liberals, and you will see people say, then why would we listen? Florida may be first. Already we have seen Joe Biden in the past year speaking only to blue states about COVID, not red states. Red states completely defying the federal government. How long until the federal government's authority is just considered void? How long until red states then say, we're going to take command of local National Guard posts and we're going to take command of the military posts, and the federal government says no? How long until Joe Biden sends in, or Donald Trump? I think it would be Trump. I think Democrats will say no. Trump will send in national federal police to stop abortions. It's entirely possible. I'm not saying probable. I'm saying it's possible. I don't know what will happen. But imagine the scenario. Democrats refuse to ban abortion. They start running state-funded abortion clinics. They start smuggling people in from red states to get abortions. And the federal government says that's illegal and moves to shut them down. They surround an abortion clinic and say, come out with your hands up. Antifa and California or Nevada or Colorado send in police to defy the military, and they refuse to do it. And then what? Maybe no, Colorado state level law enforcement would stand against the U.S. Army or National Guard. Or maybe they will. Maybe they'll claim Trump is illegitimate. Maybe they'll claim some nonsense about insurrectionists in the 14th Amendment and say the government's been captured and we refuse to listen. Maybe they will choose to take orders from the state government over the federal government and actually stand in defiance to defend an abortion clinic. Or maybe abortion won't be the issue. I don't know for sure. But I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 8 p.m. tonight at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. We'll talk more about this. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all then.